It's spinning. Okay, here we are. It is us and it is now up on YouTube. So hello and welcome to this panel collaboration among Virtual Coffee, Collab Lab, and Protege.dev. We are very, very happy to be here today to talk about empowering junior developers. I am Becca Hart-Weigel, and I am here from Virtual Coffee. And here with me today, I have Andrew. So if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Andrew Hedges, and I'm the founder of the Collab Lab. I'll be talking a little bit more about that later, but it's a program for early career people to gain experience. I'm also an engineering manager at Zapier, an workflow automation company, and have been doing web development for a really long time and engineering management for quite a few years now too. More than I want to count, I guess.
So glad to have you here with us. Drew?
Yeah, so I'm Drew Clements. I'm a front-end developer with a company called Foster Commerce. But for fun, around this time last year, actually, we started building Protege.dev, and what we're trying to do with that is build a platform that like levels the playing field for both parties in the hiring process.
Yeah, I'm very happy to have both of you with us today. I think all of our organizations have been doing things to foster community and to support people. And you know, like happy 1 year to you, Drew. Virtual Coffee we're coming up on our 100th virtual coffee on March 23rd, and on April 9th, it will be our 1 year birthday, I guess, too. So we're an organization that supports developers at all stages of the journey, and we get together a couple of times a week, and we have a pretty active Slack, and we do some monthly challenges and events, and it's just a really positive community. And so all three of our organizations know the challenges that junior developers face. You know, whether it's from experience because we're new to the industry, or from what we hear and what we see. And it's been something that we're all kind of very invested in and passionate about. And so this is why we're here today, to kind of walk through this. And we're not going to solve the problem today, but hopefully we can at least bring some hope and positivity, and maybe can continue this conversation in some ways. So you can drop your questions in the chat and in YouTube, and we'll try and make sure that we get to all of them today. First, we're going to do a little bit of background. So each of us is going to kind of talk about particular problems that we see in the industry, challenges that we want to address, and to get a well-rounded picture, I guess, of some of the things that we're going to talk about, and then we'll open it up for questions from there. So I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about, you know, the challenges of learning today and coming into the tech industry. One of the great things about the tech industry is we have so many new people coming in because there are many different ways to get into the industry. So it's whether you're self-taught, or you're going to a boot camp, or you have a CS degree. There's a wide range that allows many different people to come into the industry, and that's fantastic. But as part of that, there are a lot of challenges too. And some of that is there are colleges and universities and curriculums and boot camps out there that aren't preparing people for the industry. And so they might say, we're going to get you job ready, but what does job ready really mean? And so a lot of people expect to come through these programs or to finish this curriculum and they can jump right into a job. And what happens is they struggle through interview practices, which there are so many predatory interview practices, and we will touch on that at some point today. But also education hasn't prepared them to do things like talk through their code or to collaborate with other people. And some of the main things that you're doing when you join a team is you need to communicate openly. You need to be able to ask questions. And if you're in an environment where that's not encouraged or that's not a priority, then it's going to be much tougher to kind of figure out, okay, like what should I be doing? What is important for me to ask right now? And I know when after I finished boot camp, I had asked a bunch of different boot camp grads who were further down the line from me, like, when did you finally feel comfortable? And this might just go across the board, but for them, it was, 6 months to a year before I felt comfortable. And I think a lot of the problem of that stemmed from not being sure of when they should ask questions or how they should say something. And so then rather than saying it, they didn't say anything at all. So there's definitely a need for a focus on collaboration, on communication. And we teach this thought process and working through code, which is really, really important. But most of my time I spend debugging. And I like learning those debugging tools is central and key. And I find that that's also lacking in a lot of curriculums or what people are teaching today. Along with Git, I reached out and asked some other people what they felt that they were missing. And it was Git, diving into large code bases. So you have projects that you're working on that are a couple of files, but in reality, like if you're working on a team or in a company that has an established code base, you're going to see a lot of stuff. And so then it becomes even more important, I think, to ask questions about what you're doing. And, also, of course, my big thing is community. I think community is super important. And a lot of people coming into tech find that they don't have a supportive community. So it's one thing to have a supportive company culture, which is really important. But I also think having a supportive community to get you there, that can help you understand how to work through some of those issues and to work through those challenges that a lot of us face with imposter syndrome and not knowing what we should be doing or what we should be saying. And when you are in a safe space, when you are in a community that provides support for that, that's going to be invaluable, I think, as you move forward in learning and in growing and in finding a job. There's a couple more things that I hope that we can touch on, but also, there's this lack of some skill sets, like accessibility is a lesson that people might happen to come across, right? And that's not ideal, right? Accessibility should be across the board in every lesson, what you're doing, what you're learning. Testing, a lot of people are talking about, I don't know anything about testing because we didn't cover it. But, having that mentorship that can kind of help you fill in those gaps rather than like, just go learn this yourself, but just having that support, I think, is so important. And I know some people in the chat are talking about, being in boot camp and that being a challenge to ask questions. And so, having an open community and a solid supportive place for junior developers, I think, is the first step in building the confidence that we need to get to that next step, and I feel fortunate because I feel like, somebody took a chance on me and that's why I got here. So in many ways, I feel very, very lucky for where I am because I had these things, but it's still a challenge, to prepare yourself to move into the industry. And I know, Drew, you're going to talk about, looking for those first jobs. So if you want to go ahead and jump in here and talk about those challenges too.
There, I agree with a lot of what you just said. I myself am only where I'm at now in my career because of people who took chances on me. Like from day one, someone took a chance on me as a designer, and then they took a chance on moving me into a developer role before I was even close to being qualified. And then even beyond that, my mentor took a chance on bringing me on as a part-time employee, and I don't think I've had any job in the last 5 years where it wasn't them taking a chance first. But there are a lot of challenges in finding a junior job. The ones I'm going to speak primarily to the ones that we're trying to not necessarily fix, but address with Protege. So one of those is that there's just a lack of jobs, or maybe more so, not a lack of jobs, but a lack of a good resource to find where those jobs are. There are companies out there that have good, junior developer programs and are very supportive. But they may not all use LinkedIn. They may not all use these other job boards or ways to list their jobs. So you're never going to even know that they're out there. And even when you do find a lot of the current job boards now, they're saturated with senior and lead positions, which is understandable. Companies need that level of experience to keep momentum and stuff going. But there are some companies that absolutely do have the resources and the bandwidth where they could have an extremely impactful junior developer, program, and for whatever reason they just don't. And another challenge you kind of run into is, if on the occasion that you do find a junior role, it may not be, remote friendly, which is almost a non-starter, in this time right now. Or it may just have unrealistic requirements, like a 4-year degree, or they want a junior developer with 4 years experience, or stuff like that. And so that's kind of some of the stuff we're trying to address with Protege. And some of it is, maybe some of these companies have been burned by some of those boot camps that, I mean, I know a lot of people who have gotten hired from boot camps, and they're absolutely a valuable resource. But there are some out there that don't pay attention to what's going on in the market, don't pay attention to what's going on in the tech industry. So they're teaching curriculum that's not even applicable to the region that they're teaching it in. And then also, they're not preparing them for the application process or the debugging process, or what testing or accessibility even is. So maybe some of these companies have taken a chance on those devs before and got burned by it. So now they're really hesitant to. And to me, that's probably like the biggest challenges, is where can you find relevant jobs? Where can you find companies that will be willing to invest in you if they have the job position available?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's super important. There are so many stages and phases, I think, that need to happen here. And Andrew, you're doing some great stuff to be part of that. And you, I think, have some really solid ideas on where we need to move next, if that's something you can go ahead and talk about.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so much of what both of you talked about really resonates with me. I'm glad to hear from your perspective, Drew, that there are a lot of companies out there that are open to kind of early career people. It does seem like that's opening up a little bit more, just even in the last year, and maybe being forced to go remote has played a part in that or something. I don't know exactly what the dynamics are, but and then Becca, all the things you talked about around collaboration and just, I don't know, all that stuff, community and all those things. It's exactly what we're trying to address with the Collab Lab. So yeah, I guess one of the kind of main problems that I see right now in the tech industry is that hiring managers are reluctant to bring on early career people, fearing that it's going to slow them down. Leadership at companies, they don't want to necessarily kind of put if they can hire somebody who's further along in their career, they'd rather do that kind of as a general rule. And for the same reason, thinking that it's going to slow them down to have sort of early career people on these teams. But to me, like, the good news here is that it's actually the things that early career people need to succeed are learnable. They actually make the whole team better. So these are things that they're not. It does take some work for a software team to kind of put the right structures in place, the right processes, and all those kinds of things. Good documentation. Somebody has to write that stuff, right? So those things do take some groundwork, but they make the whole team better, right? So it's actually you know, places that are already kind of investing in their teams in those ways are probably better set up to take on early career people than they even realize. Like I'm a firm believer that, you know, diverse teams in all intersections, but including across sort of experience levels, are healthy teams. And you know, you want to bring in people in and give them room to grow within their role. So you know, you don't want to stack your team with a bunch of senior people, and then there's kind of a bottleneck of people wanting a promotion, and there's nowhere for them to go, and those kinds of things. Like that's not a good dynamic on a team. So yeah, so to speak a little bit about what the Collab Lab is doing. So you know, we provide remote collaborative project practice for early career developers. We put people on teams of 4 with 3 mentors who are usually, I mean, almost all of them are, you know, professionals in the field. They work on a project for the course of 8 weeks where they build an app together. And really they, you know, we try to emphasize with them that it's not school, they're a team just trying to get something done. And so just really try to simulate as much as we can that experience of being in a job and having to work together as a software team. So they're pair programming, they're doing code reviews, you know, they're having to merge their code, you know, write PRs and all those kinds of things. They're doing demos and retros, all the things that you would do on a normal software team. So it really does, I think, fill in that gap, Becca, that you were talking about, of where, you know, a coding boot camp, you learn some things about how to code, and you don't learn much beyond that. And you know, we could talk more about what the reasons for that are, but you know, we're trying to kind of give that little bit of extra experience on a team so these people can go into an interview and just be a little more confident, and, you know, like have context for some of the questions they're being asked about, you know, how they work together with other people. So we are also trying to be more intentional about getting people jobs too. So you know, Protege.dev is one of the resources that we share with our community, but we started a new program just a couple of days ago called Career Lab, where we're really focusing on getting people, getting them ready to get the interview, and then once they get into the interview, how to do well in that setting too. So seemed like kind of a natural add-on once we thought of it. But yeah, I think there's hope. I think there's hope, but I think it's and that, you know, I do see the industry kind of shifting in this way a little bit, but there's still a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I think it's building momentum for companies to get on board with hiring juniors. Maybe if a couple of big players like kind of step into it and, you know, embrace it, maybe that'll kind of like have a ripple effect down to the smaller guys. But I definitely agree that it's definitely changed a lot within the last year, from the time when I was trying to find a job last year to now. So, you know, we're already we're headed in the right direction. We just need to keep going. And it really, after hearing more about what Collab Lab does, it kind of seems like Protege may be like the step 3 after Collab Lab, you know, boot camp, Collab Lab, and then maybe Protege is the resource where you can find good jobs.
Yeah, and I would also like to say that, you know, Virtual Coffee is run by volunteers, Protege is run by volunteers. Andrew, you guys are a nonprofit, and that's a fairly new thing that you've gone through too. And so, you know, it's just very much trying to attack these challenges in the best ways that we can, like with the time that is available, right? And so finding ways to do that can be hard as well. But I love like good documentation, Andrew. I think that you mentioned it. Like, good documentation is fantastic. And also it's hard to write, especially when you have people writing it who are not close to the new end of the level, right? And so, you know, that's when somebody asked before about asking questions as a junior developer. Like, if there's documentation and you have questions, then definitely ask it, because I find that when people ask me questions about documentation, it's because I've already gone through this before, right? And so then I miss that step because it's something that comes natural to me, and I've like lost that little piece of the struggle. And so maintaining a connection with that struggle and having those questions and having people talk about their experiences is super important to understanding, like, okay, how can we get better too?
Yeah, I have a little story about documentation from my team at Zapier that just happened. So, you know, we have a service that we run, and we have sort of a a run book of how to run the service, how to deploy it. And it was, the first version was written by a senior engineer and our SRE sort of partner, and it was all accurate, but it wasn't like very digestible if you didn't kind of have their level of knowledge. And so Stacy Taylor, who's my co-founder at Collab Lab, but is also just a year into her engineering journey, went and rewrote the whole thing to the point where even me as a manager am now able to deploy the service. So I think that's some of the value that early career people bring to these teams is, from the perspective of like, I don't know anything, so I don't have all the assumptions that you do. So I'm going to write this in a way that's, much more thorough and clear. So big win for our team having her there.
Yeah, for sure. And that's such an asset. Go ahead, Drew.
I was going to say, to circle back to the asking questions things as a junior developer, I ran into something just this week at work where I was given a task and my first 2 days on it was almost exclusively just asking questions. What is this supposed to do? Have we considered this? And I think I ended up having lengthy conversations with 3 of our different team members, and me asking questions was helpful, not just for me to get the task done, but it also revealed some lack of clarification and documentation in the task itself. It also revealed like some weaknesses in what the current plan of implementation was. So I think sometimes junior developers feel like asking questions is a bad thing because you're supposed to just know it. But that's absolutely not the case. And asking questions, that you're going to learn something, you may reveal something, and everyone in the process grows.
Yeah, I love that point.
Sure. And I know we've got a question in the chat. Somebody said, I don't understand how companies can only be getting into hiring junior devs now. Everyone was junior at some point, including the people who are currently working. And I have a couple of thoughts on this, and maybe you guys can help me frame this as well, because I know that there have been companies that I've talked to that are smaller teams or mid-size, and they say, we just can't take on that challenge. What's happened in the past is we've hired junior developers and we have worked with them and we've helped them to grow. And then as soon as they hit that senior point, they're off to some large company that can pay them a ton of money, and we just can't compete with that. And so, one of my responses most recently has been, if I don't know that every company has the ability to hire junior developers, but you can support junior developers in other ways. And so, I very much appreciated people coming and like mentoring at virtual coffee, or like Andrew, I'm sure that you feel the same way at Collab Lab. There are other ways to support junior developers if your company either can't or isn't willing to hire junior developers into a role. But I would like to know if you have other thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, one thing, so a lot of the people who are more senior, at least like the big companies now, came up through maybe CS programs and that kind of thing. And so like, a company, like Google or, whoever, like big companies will have a campus recruiting operation where they will go and they'll find entry-level software engineers who coming out of CS programs. Those people kind of grow into senior developers and things. I mean, that probably doesn't explain all of it, but they're like, I was self-taught. I started 23 years ago or something doing this stuff. So, they're, kind of like Drew, like people took a chance on me at a couple points, especially kind of making the switch from, individual contributor to manager and that kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know. It's, there's a bit of sometimes, I mean, there's, like you were saying at the beginning, Becca, there's so many ways to get into this industry. Some people just hustle and they like, this is what I did actually, was just hang out my shingle, as a freelancer for the first year, to try to get some experience until a company was comfortable hiring me on. That's one path. So it is one of the things I like about the least about tech is just that it is really hard to be truly entry level in this. Like you have to come in with valuable skills in order to get hired, as opposed to like aptitude and willingness to work hard and have the company teach you on the job. Like it's just, there are very few industries where that's not, or where that's not possible. So
yeah, and I know go ahead, Drew.
Sorry. I was just going to point out Techie Chap in the chat had a really good point that you can't compete with higher pay, but you can you can compete by being a better place to work. I 100% agree with that. I've worked at places you could not pay me enough money to go back to. So like and there's a lot of instances where people, they may be willing to take the pay cut just to work for somewhere where they're treated more like people, or the benefits are different or whatever.
For sure. And I think that's another thing that nobody really talks about, or they certainly don't teach it in many places, is when you go on an interview, you're also interviewing that company, right? And so recently I had another mom who was coming into tech ask me about whether or not I thought she should take a job. It was going to be a pay increase. It wasn't a huge one, but at the same time, I know for me personally, I will always value the people that I work with over anything else. And that's really what my journey into tech has taught me, that, if I don't need the money, then I am going to go to the place where I have supportive people around me, people who see me as a human being first and not a developer, and that they're willing to understand me personally before anything else, right? Because I think that, when you have that psychological safety, it's really hard to, put a value on what that is. And I think that, when somebody's like, okay, but we're going to give you $30,000 more, like, it's a little hard, right? Like, you have to think through that. Well, $30,000, maybe it'll be okay, right? But I don't know. I'm really not a risk taker. And so for me, like, I am very happy to be where I am valued and respected.
Yeah, I think there's a ton of value, especially early in your career, of being in a place where they are giving you a ton of support and space to learn, and helping you kind of level up, because that's that's really hard to. I mean, it's not a given at every place. Like, there are places there where you'll be doing the exact same thing over and over again every day and not really learning that much. So, if your goal is to get better as a developer, it's the people that are willing to mentor and kind of support you, jump on a call and pair program and do those kinds of things. So yeah, when you're interviewing, ask those questions. I mean, these are totally fair questions to ask. Ask about onboarding, ask about ongoing mentorship. What's like, is there some kind of growth plan in place that, where I know I can kind of track my progress and those kinds of things.
Those are such great points. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about a growth plan, because it makes sense to me, but I don't know that I've ever heard anybody else talk about that. And suddenly it's like, wow, that would be really useful to talk about.
Yeah, so at Zapier, we have a career growth framework. So we have, for different roles, we have actually a set of levels, L1 through L, whatever it goes to, 6 or 7 or something. So each one of those sort of spells out a set of competencies and behaviors at different levels. So, as you progress through your career, one of the axes along which that changes is, you kind of are receiving direction. And then eventually, as you get more senior, you are sort of initiating more, and then maybe you're starting to work across teams and those kinds of things. So, yeah, at Zapier, we put a lot of attention into growth plans, and so we have whole systems and things for that, where with a person with their manager can set goals for the coming 6 months and make a plan as to like how they're going to get to certain sort of benchmarks and things to make sure they keep progressing in their career.
I think that's super important. And I also see there are some companies that want to champion junior developers, but they don't have those support structures set up. So then it becomes this like very challenging situation, because then you go into the job and you think, oh, okay, like they're all about helping me as a junior developer. And you get there and it's just, I don't know, like a total disaster,
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you think is a good way to navigate through that? Or are there questions to ask beforehand, I think, to identify, okay, they might be champions of junior developers, but they surely do not have the support structure set up?
Yeah, I think so much of a person's experience in their job is dependent on their manager. So, I would really recommend, if you're in an interview and you're talking to the hiring manager, the person you're going to work for, some companies that they don't actually structure things that way. But if you have the opportunity to talk to the person you're going to be reporting to, just ask them very directly, how do you how do you plan to support me? Like I'm early in my career, I'm learning a lot, but a lot of things I don't know yet. What kind of structures are you going to put in place? Like what kind of guardrails are there going to be for me so I don't accidentally like take down production or whatever the thing is, right? So I think it's a hiring manager that has these things in mind already is going to have answers for that. If they kind of fumble around with their answers to that, it might be kind of a bad sign. So that's the whole interviewing the company aspect of things. But I think the manager is really key.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, Drew, I even feel like this can be tackled in a job description in some way. So I don't know if you have thoughts on that too.
It is, and we try to, or one of the things we're going to try to implement is how can we get some of that information about the company out before the candidate even hits the apply button. But I mean, that'll largely be coming down to trusting the company to put that information in there. But we definitely plan to put like some verbiage in place to kind of like nudge them in that direction. But to that point, a lot of kind of like vetting that out comes back to the interview process being that two-way conversation. I was in an interview where I was being considered for a junior role, and I asked those questions like, what do y'all provide for like learning resources or things of that nature? And I was met with, we don't really do that here. It's not in the budget. We don't really consider it priority. And at that point, like a job offer didn't come through, but as soon as I heard those answers, I knew that my response would have been no either way. But it all comes back to that two-way conversation during the interview.
Yeah. We've got a couple questions in the chat, and I just want to say thanks everyone for dropping those in there. You can continue to drop them in there, and I'm going to try and make sure we catch them. But two that are soon going to drop off of my screen. One, the first is, as an individual contributor, how can you push your company to hire more early in career devs? So maybe let's start there, and then we'll work towards that second one. I guess, well, I'm just going to tie it in because they're closely related. So the second would be good resources for managers or mentors for helping junior developers define good 6-month growth goals. That was a mouthful to say.
Yeah, it's I think it can be tough as an IC, individual contributor, to have a lot of influence over that. But one thing I think you could do is to be talking to your manager about the fact that you would be willing to mentor somebody. If there's somebody on the team who was sort of junior to you, that you would be willing to spend time with them to show them how the systems work, or if they get stuck, to pair program, to do all those kinds of things. So that could kind of plant a seed with a manager that maybe we do have the capacity for this. It's actually it ties really closely into growth. So if you want to, I know my perspective on it anyway is, if you want to be a senior developer, you need to be mentoring people that are more junior to you, because that is part of being that senior person. You're providing leadership, you're providing maybe technical direction and those kinds of things. And the way you do that is by sharing that information, sharing that knowledge with other people on the team. So I know on my team at Zapier, I reward that very directly. In performance reviews, we talk about mentorship, and that gets recognized. So, but yeah, that's a really good question about how an IC can have that kind of influence on the org. I don't know that I have a great answer for it, but I don't know, Drew, if you have any ideas.
I would, for me, and this is going to be my point because it worked for me, is just keep putting the bug in their ear that it's a good idea. That company that took a chance on me, moving me from a design to a developer role, that only happened because I just kept saying like, hey, I'm willing, I'm willing, I want to do this. Like, if you give me the chance, I'm not going to fail, because I'm not going to give myself that option. But also maybe like, maybe find like some case studies or like some blog articles like, oh, hey, it worked for them here. I'm already interested in this. This ties back into what you were saying, Andrew. I'm already interested in this, type of mentorship. So if you consider doing something like this, I can be your go-to for kind of like, keeping an eye or track on that as we like build that process up. So I think it's from an individual, it would be tough from an individual contributor's position, but it would just be keep planting the seed, put some resources in front of them when you can.
Yeah, and I think along with that, I'm just going to tie this back to documentation right now. I think my background is in teaching, so I taught college English for 10 years prior to coming into tech. And so I'm like thinking through this in terms of that, right? Like, because we're teaching people different things, and there's a curriculum and there's a structure and there's things you work through. And I also think that sometimes people are, one, forced to mentor junior devs, and that's not good. Let's not force people to mentor. And two, some people aren't supported in their mentoring. So I don't think everybody is necessarily meant to be a mentor. I think you can be a supportive person. But I think that it is important to recognize that you need support too, to understand the needs of other people. And maybe that's something you could. But if we could find companies that have these processes for working with junior developers, for supporting them, and like, hey, let's put these all online on someplace, right? That's easy access so people know. And then you can refer to that and say like, okay, this company is similar to mine, or, oh, this sounds like our structure. We could totally do this without, having to spend tons of resources or whatever to get it started, because I think that can be a challenge for a lot of people. Okay, just trying to catch up.
One thing I'm doing now, so the company I'm with, I'm really fortunate to be with them, and that they are really adamant about making sure I'm like fully supported, in every direction. And part of that goal of support of this year is I'm going to be doing some writing for the company's blog, but since I'm going to be doing the one writing it, I'm going to position it as, or not every article, but when it's relative, I'm going to position it as, these people took a chance on this junior dev, and it's paying off in this way. They knew from the get-go that I would maybe a little slower at some task, but they saw other attributes that I had that they thought would be valuable to the team, whether it be, I have an interest in content creation, I have an interest in writing, whatever it was that they saw, they saw it. And this ties back into some verbiage you were using earlier, Andrew, that they weren't just hiring a junior developer to fill a seat. They're actively investing in me, and at some point they know that their return on interest is going to pay dividends.
Yeah, and something I love about what you just said, like you also you had a design background, right? You came from being a designer, right? Mm-hmm. So like a lot of career switchers, they bring a whole other skill set to engineering that somebody who just came up straight through that line wouldn't have, right? So that's something I love about just, like you said, like teaching. I just hired someone who has like a science background. I'm really excited for her to start on my team. Like it's, I love that though, like it kind of rounds out the kind of capabilities of the team to have people that aren't just really narrowly focused on just the tech.
For sure. I want to just jump into the chat for a second. I know Sahil said, mention this idea, someone taking a chance. When people say someone took a chance on me, it's frequently a white man who's saying that, right? And so then there's this, disproportionate amount of chances being given to white men, right? And that certainly is a problem. And I know, Collab Lab, you all are doing work to help underrepresented groups diversify. Tech is working on, providing resources and jobs and stuff like that too. So there's certainly like that extra challenge for people trying to break into the industry.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We've been really intentional about trying to, we'll keep the barriers low. So we're also all volunteer run, and it's free for people to participate. It's just 5 hours a week. So, if you're a mom in tech, or you have a full-time job, or I kind of repeat myself there, I guess, but you can still do the program, right? Like it's like we've done that on purpose to make it more accessible. And yeah, I think Sahil, and if this is the Sahil that comes to the Tech Talks, how's it going? Good to see you again. Yeah, it's a great point, and it's something that we are actively trying to work to kind of correct. I mean, I'd say very often, at least internally to Collab Lab, that we're an activist organization. We're actively trying to change tech by making it so it's not just the white guys that get the benefit of the doubt. So and there's a lot of work to be done there still, but and I recognize all the ways that I've benefited from my privilege. Like there's been jobs that I was not qualified for when I started them, and I kind of grew into them or didn't. And it's I think if you were a Black woman in tech, you might not have had those same chances or the same kind of chances to rebound from those mistakes. So definitely recognize that. We're trying to do what we can to fix it.
Yeah, and we have some plans to try to help from our end on that with Protege as well. We have some ideas for some features that will, so like one of them is just like maybe hiding some of that information from the employers until either you're ready to reveal it or, at your first interview, so that they can't at a glance, see your gender or race and make a decision there. Like we're not sure exactly how this will work. We're still kind of shaping it out, but hopefully they'll be forced to look at what you can offer before they even get an idea of who you are.
I have an idea for that feature. So you could start off with, by default, hiding names and photos and stuff like that. And then how it's like dark mode and light mode. You could have bias mode where they could turn on those things.
Yeah, that'd be good.
That is
awesome.
Well,
we were thinking of giving that control to the candidates that create an account. So if they don't care, then they don't have to turn it on. But if they do think it's going to affect them, then they'll have that ability. Mm-hmm. But also, while we're on that subject, I know someone who within the last week, who is not a white man, who had someone take a chance on them at a pretty big tech operation. So
great.
Things are already moving in the right direction on that front too.
Yeah, I mean, that was me too. And I think that, what's important is everyone who had someone take a chance on them is willing to offer that same chance, right? And actually, I think it was our latest podcast episode with Kirk. Kirk was talking about this idea of everybody should be allowed to make mistakes, right? And somebody offered him an opportunity to make mistakes, right? And then you should allow other people the opportunity to make mistakes too. And so, there are all of these experiences that we have when we grow, and we need to make sure that when we have privilege, we use that to help other people, right? And to elevate underrepresented groups of people as much as we can, because that's also what allows for that to happen for somebody that's not a white man to say like, oh, somebody took a chance on me, because it's, you create structures that support that thought process, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
I think we are seeing, a lot of companies right now have very ambitious hiring plans around, trying to find people from underrepresented groups. So it's a good time to maybe to have somebody take a chance on you. But the problem is that a lot of these companies have these goals without having done the work to make sure that their cultures are inclusive and supportive in the right ways. So this is where it becomes, again, very important to interview the company, because they may be saying the right things, but the reality on the inside might be that that they're not quite there, or that it's not evenly distributed around the company. So I don't know. I don't know how to access that information. I think people who are from underrepresented groups are probably a lot better than I am at finding those things out, whisper networks and those kinds of things. But I think it's in some ways it's a great time for this, but it's also a bit of a dangerous time. Like you could kind of find yourself in a company that's not walking the walk as much as they're talking the talk.
Yeah. So hiring diversely doesn't necessarily always mean supporting diversely.
Yes, yep. That is the quote. Yeah, and so there's just so many levels I think to work on, and I think that one, finding a supportive community is super important because Andrew, you mentioned this idea of the whisper network, and I found that to be useful in my time of interviewing, where like there was a company I thought was a really awesome company that's well known out there. And I talked about it on Twitter, and then somebody from the company DM'd me and said, this is the worst place to work. It is not supportive. It is awful. And I cannot wait to get out of this company. And that was a shock for me because there are lots of people promoting that company out there. It could have been that individual's experience, but at the same time, that's still a problem and a challenge. So, like having that network or, having a community of supportive people too, it's, I think, hard when you get a job as a junior developer to know what other jobs are like too. And so if you have no frame of reference, your terrible experience might seem okay, right? But when you have people that you can talk to about that, who can say, this is not a healthy situation, you need to get out of there, let me help connect you to someone else, then, you can be in a better place.
This is where those communities, I mean, Virtual Coffee and Collab Lab and other communities are so important, that you have at least a few people you can talk to and have, a little bit different experience, and you can kind of compare, right?
Yeah, I know we've got a couple people in the chat talking about volunteering to mentor at their companies, and some of them it's gone well. Some of them haven't been offered the opportunity to do that because their company doesn't hire junior developers. But I think maybe there are different collaborations that can allow you to do that mentorship, right? Like you need mentors. I'm sure, Andrew, you do. We do lots of mentoring at Virtual Coffee. So I think that also, you don't have to be stuck to mentoring within your company to be supportive of people either.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've seen a couple people, just engineers at different companies. I mean, companies like Twitter, just going on Twitter and saying, hey, I just want to help some people. Like I have capacity to take on 5 people, at 10-minute calls a day or something. They just kind of set some parameters around it and just go out there and people come and get some help. And I think, there's a lot to know about mentoring and how to do it well, but I also think there's a lot of value in just starting and just saying like, hey, let's just get on a call and screen share and talk about code. And that's a great way to kind of get started with it and, give somebody a little bit of help.
Yeah, for sure. I know someone in the chat also asked about what it looks like when a company is actively investing in a junior or someone trying to get to the junior level. So I don't know if either of you have thoughts on that.
Has that been your experience, Drew? Like, do you feel like your company invested in you?
Yeah, absolutely. They, well, I was actually initially turned down for the job. I interviewed with them and I told them, I'm maybe intermediate junior at best. And he was like, well, we're looking for someone a little more senior. And then he came back a week later because the person they chose over me turned out to be, a bad culture fit, or for whatever reason, didn't work out. So I was actually turned down and then brought into the job anyways. So they were very aware that I was not up to the initial par that they had set, but everything since then has been, I think, I don't remember if it was this week or last week, but I brought up a concern to my boss. I said, hey, this is what I've been dealing with. This is where I think it's heading if it's not addressed. And I've worked in companies before where that would have been met with, well, this is what you're hired to do, deal with it. And I was immediately met with like gratitude that I brought it to their attention, and like an immediate plan of action to resolve it. But also, so like absolutely supported on a personal level, but they've also given me access to, various paid courses for the tech stack that we use. I have a senior dev that's kind of, I don't know what the phrase would be, but he's more or less tied to me. So if I have questions, I have, 100% clearance to, pull him into as many meetings as I have to ask questions and get things resolved. So yeah, I'm absolutely supported.
Nice. I like that you kind of joined at the keyboard or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a big one, just to have somebody sort of assigned to you, like, it's sort of safe to go to with questions. Can be really intimidating coming into a new company and without, especially as an early career person, if you don't have a ton of context, even knowing like, is this a question everybody has, or is this a question because I don't know enough, or, just having all those kind of self-doubts. So I think, to answer the question also, there's like a strong onboarding process is important. Not like we don't have a formal mentorship. Well, it's a little complicated, but we don't have a generalized sort of formal mentorship program at Zapier, but we have a strong culture of just supporting and helping each other. So that can take a couple of forms. They have some companies, they have formal mentorship. You're assigned a person, they're kind of your long-term sort of buddy. Some companies may take more of a technical mentorship approach where it's a specific topic, and you pair with somebody to who has that domain knowledge and kind of make those knowledge transfers. And then it's always a good sign when they have money set aside for conferences and training and courses and all those kinds of things as well. And again, just interview the company, like find out how they go about it, because it doesn't have to be one cookie cutter way of doing it, but as long as they're thinking about it and they have kind of some of those pieces in place, you're probably pretty well off.
Yeah, and going back to the interview conversation again, I interviewed with another company last year that during my interview, they didn't really ask much about my tech competency. They kind of, I'd done a take-home project where they already knew my technical aptitude from there, and the entire interview was them asking about where do I feel I am, where do I want to go, like how interested I am in pursuing these other things, and all of those questions were followed up with, all of this sounds awesome because we have this in place to support growth. We have this in place to support, you get X amount of hours per week just to either invest in learning or personal projects. So if you can get to the interview process and you see a conversation like that, that's a very good sign that they're very willing in investing in you.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say ask those questions, even if you are afraid to ask them, because it's going to be so important. And if I've learned anything over the last year, over communication is better than under communication. It allows you to grow much faster. So if you're asking those questions, you're going to grow much faster if you allow yourself the ability to do that and to get those questions answered. And there's definitely something to be said for, digging into the code and figuring it out yourself. But there's also my other go-to is like stubbornness. And so there's like, I'm gonna do it myself because I know I can, right? And you don't want to do that. The opposite of that, when you hit stubborn mode, then it's time to say like, okay, it's time for me to ask somebody because there might be a different approach that I'm missing. Or, they can talk me through this in a couple of minutes. And although I could have done this in 2 hours, I'll learn from their explanation and maybe even better than I would have on my own. So there's nothing wrong with asking questions.
Sometimes that person explaining it to you learns something about the system too, because they're explaining it and they realize, oh, there's this piece that I don't actually know that well, so let's go find out or something. And that process, that stubbornness, that's sometimes called white knuckling, right? Where you grip the steering wheel when the road gets bumpy, you grip it even harder and your knuckles go white. So.
Somebody else asked about finding a good mentor. And I think, that can be really hard. I think it's finding those communities first and what naturally comes as a mentor. So anyone that has mentored me, it's come because either someone has connected us because we have similar interests or because I'm in a community with them. And I think it's hard to just cold call. I don't know how DM them and say, can you be my mentor? Right. Because although that might work, I think for me, having the relationship beforehand with that person is really helpful because I personally am more able to ask questions when I don't have to deal with the nerves of meeting somebody new, which is like very much something that happens to me.
Yeah, I like that too. I've been approached in that way a couple of times. Like, can you be my mentor? It's like, I don't even know what you're looking for, really. Like, and these are people even that I had an established relationship with. So I think it can kind of grow much more organically if it's the question's more like, hey, I have some questions around this front end development. You mind if I ask you a couple questions? And then we maybe get on a roll with that, and it feels like a good fit. So that's something, I don't know, it's a tricky one. But I think it's like, the thing I would recommend is just be talking to people about this stuff all the time, and like some mentors will emerge. There'll be people that you click with who know some things that you want to know, or are in a position that you want to get to eventually, and they can kind of just start, kind of naturally give you advice. But make it, since I think there's some things around making it easy for the mentor as well. So if you get into a sort of a mentorship relationship, coming prepared with like, here's the thing I want to work on, maybe sending it to them in advance so they have a chance to review it before you get on a call with them or something. There's just kind of be mindful of their time, so that you kind of make it as easy for them to help you as possible.
There's also resources like I think it's called codingcoach.io, where that's just an entire platform of people that sign up to that platform are wanting and actively looking for people to mentor. So I don't know of any others outside of that, but there's probably more than just that one to be a good place to find people who are at least willing.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. And I know we're almost close to time here, so I'm gonna just jump in the chat for the last question. Somebody just said, Kirk said, if you're going to ask, make sure you frame what you want. Context, 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 and 100% that. But the last question we'll take here, and you can always feel free to, add us on Twitter. We're happy to answer questions in whatever way we can. But if someone takes a chance on you and you end up failing, how do you know when a junior is failing? And I think that's a really interesting question. And I think it's probably one that I've had personally about myself, but have never spoken aloud. So I appreciate seeing it.
What does it mean to fail exactly?
I think a quick summary is I think a junior is failing when the company stops supporting them. So like, I felt like I was failing just yesterday when I was trying to finish this task up. Like I said, I was on like so many calls with so many different developers trying to get like enough context and clarification on what was supposed to happen. And like I literally sat at my desk and thought to myself, like, I'm failing at this. They're not going to keep me around much longer. And going back to them being supportive, I was met with, let's jump on another call. Let's call the person who initially wrote it and get more clarification there. So I think if I don't think a junior will end up in a position that they're completely incapable of performing, to a reasonable degree. And if there's any failure, if they meet kind of like the baseline requirements within a reasonable degree, and there's failure from that point, I think it's because the company stopped supporting, or maybe they ran out of resources. And I don't think it would ever come, or I mean, maybe if like the developer just like gives up and stops trying. But at that point, I wouldn't even really consider that a failure as much as it would be a resignation of effort, maybe.
Yeah, for me, it was just a total change in mindset, right? Because I kept thinking like, I'm failing. Like, I am not cut out for this. I should just go find some other career that I should be doing. And then it was this recognition of a couple of things. It's not failure, right? It's a growing process. And someone was telling me the other day, they're not called growing pains because they feel good, right? And so like when people grow, you are being stretched, right? And it does hurt and it's painful, but you're learning. And so it's not a failure if you don't complete the task. It's not a failure if you've done something the wrong way. It is growing, right? You are thinking through things, you're growing, and you're learning. And so that's super important. You're learning through those hard processes. And when you feel like you're failing, that's when you reach out and you communicate that to somebody. And that gives them an opportunity to help you and to also grow at the same time through that communication. And so recognizing that we all need to be doing that communication, that we're all growing and stretching ourselves, and yeah, it does hurt a lot, but that's part of the process. And you just keep moving forward and you look for those supportive people who are there to like kind of lift you up. Like, I don't know, yesterday, I think I was like, I need a hype person today. Somebody just to be like, all right, you got this, right? But you know, those people are there for you in the community. And it's just, you as long as you are growing and you're learning and you, it doesn't even mean you have to be moving forward leaps and bounds, right? Like you could move forward a half an inch, but you've moved forward, so you've gone somewhere. And if you look at where you were 2 months ago and you can see there's been some progress, then you are moving forward. So I'm just like going to encourage a change in mindset to what those hard times look like.
Yeah, I mean, another way I've heard it said is that you failed once you've stopped trying, right? So,
yes. Yeah, I feel like this is a good place to wrap up. It is at time, and this has been really great. I had a lot of fun doing this, and we've had a lot of people watching, so I very much appreciate everyone who's watching and asking questions. And for both of you being here, I think that, you know, there are some big takeaways here. You know, there needs to be supportive structures at every level. There needs to be deliberate thought put into the things that we're doing, that whether that's in teaching, mentoring, hiring, building products for people. You know, all of this is recognizing that we're working with human beings with complex lives, and we should be there to support them. And there are different ways to do that. So continuing to think about those things and talk about things is definitely a way that we want to keep moving forward. Are there any takeaways that I know that I missed like a ton of stuff, but anything you want to highlight that I missed?
For me, I think you covered it all.
Yeah, I think that's great. I'm going to drop a couple of links on the YouTube page. There's an article that Stacy Taylor and I wrote about half a year ago or something about ways that companies can kind of set up the right structures and things to support early career people. So, you know, that's a great question earlier about, you know, how can I influence as an IC? Maybe send that article to your manager.
That is awesome. So thank you so much for being with us, Andrew and Drew, today. Maybe we can do this again sometime because I liked it.
Yeah, it's fun.
And definitely you can follow us all on Twitter. You can just follow Virtual Coffee. We're at Virtual Coffee IO. And then Collab Lab is
at _collab_lab, which is a little awkward, but all the good formulations were already taken. So
I have like 4 different versions of Virtual Coffee because I couldn't land on the right one.
Yeah.
And Drew, you are at
Dev Protege.
Dev Protege. Okay, no dots in there.
Mm-mm.
All right.
The good ones were taken.
The good ones are taken. Okay, so thanks everyone for being here. This has been very, very fun. And if you have questions, definitely hit us up on Twitter and definitely check out that link that Andrew's going to drop.
Thank you for having us, Becca.
Yeah, thank you.